Thank you, Julia. Hi, everyone. I'm Mossop from the Sydney Opera House. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and to have Jo Melillo as our guest. As you know, the title this evening is Arts Leadership, A View from Brooklyn. And it's having had the opportunity to have some discussion with Jo over lunch. What is always interesting in conversations with people who work internationally is how many of the issues are the same. And while there are some very obvious differences in terms of the way things run, at the heart of it are issues about art, artists, audiences and money that we certainly all share. Jo Melillo, as you know, is the executive producer at the Brooklyn Academy of Music and has had that role since 1999. He's responsible for the artistic direction of BAM, for some large pieces of its programming, and also for leading a team of curators who work in other areas. With a background in theatre, he came to BAM in 1983 as the founding director of the Next Wave Festival, a role that he held for 6 years before moving on to become BAM's producing director and then later to his current role. So during the time that he's been at BAM, BAM has seen huge developments in terms of programming, audiences, and the physical infrastructure. The most recent addition to BAM is what sounds like a wonderful, entirely flexible smaller theatre space as an addition to the Opera House and the Harvey Theatre, cinemas, the cafe. Over the years, BAM has showcased the work of emerging artists, established artists, and created exciting partnerships. It's an institution that's had an intense focus on the local as being part of Brooklyn, but also has moved out into a much more international role with projects like the Bridge Project, a 3-year international series of theatre productions produced by BAM, The Old Vic and Neal Street, with Sam Mendes directing a transatlantic team of actors. And also programs like the Dance Motion program with the US State Department, where the rich dance culture of the US is shared with international audiences and artists. Jo has been recognised with innumerable honours and prizes from the international governments, and he's very much engaged in speaking to the next generation of artists and arts leaders as a lecturer and speaker in fora like this and through work on boards. He's in his 30th year at BAM, and in the middle of this year, his long-term collaborator, BAM President Karen Hopkins, will be leaving the institution. So what lies ahead will be a period both of continuity and change. Many of us have come to know BAM because we've seen that it's been the place that interesting contemporary Australian work has found a home in New York, particularly for those with memories, the Next Wave Festival in 2001, showcasing a whole range of Australian work. But also because the Next Wave Festival is a place that those of us who work in the arts look to see what is most exciting and what will become the most exciting thing in the performing arts. So as well as that kind of artistic trademark, what stands out in what we can see from the outside of Jo Melillo's work has been the unique partnerships with artists over decades sometimes that have been pivotal to launching their careers, developing their relationship with audiences, and to the nature of their work. This has created an artistic platform for BAM as an institution that's allowed it to develop loyal and large audiences and to play a unique role in the ongoing renaissance of Brooklyn. So there's a lot to talk about. As Julia said, Jo is going to talk to us, then we'll have time for some discussion with me, and then we'll be going to questions and answers from you. So let me hand over to Jo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What's very important is not to assume that you know Brooklyn first and then the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So next, we're going to go to this little map here that you see, which geographically shows you the relationship between the perceived citadel of art and culture in New York City being Manhattan, and that where we, BAM, reside in that geographic area of Brooklyn. So just to begin to let you know that BAM is, or as would formally call it, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, is America's oldest continually operating performing arts center. The first performance was in 1861 when Brooklyn was a separate city to Manhattan. And at the time in 1861, there were no bridges between the island of Manhattan and the city of Brooklyn. The first bridge is the Brooklyn Bridge, which opened in 1898. So here you had this performing arts center that the people of the city of Brooklyn built. And what they built was an opera house for classical culture. And we have an archive that goes back to that last part of the 19th century that reveals the kind of programs that were being presented at that time. And they were, as usually, the influence of the European community, which is classical music in both symphonic music, chamber music, vocal recitals, opera presentations. Unfortunately, that building, the original building, was made out of wood. And in a fire in 1903, it completely burned down. And in 1908, the next slide, actually go to the next slide. This is the building they built. This is the front of the 30 Lafayette Avenue, which inside that theater, next, you'll see another photograph of the building. To the next slide, this is the Opera House. Currently, it's called the Howard Gilman Opera House. That is, next slide, another view of the interior of this beautiful Beaux-Arts facility. And although you can't see it from these particular photographs, it has an innate intimacy. And when I stand on the stage, you really feel as though that you can talk to the people in the second balcony face to face. It's that close. You can't see it from this. So that building, 30 Lafayette, houses the administrative offices. It contains 2 rehearsal studios. And the next slide, it contains, this is our BAM Cafe. The BAM Cafe, which is called the LePerc Space, the LePerc Space is the former ballroom to the facility. In 1908, you would go to the Opera House, you would have your performance, and at that time, there were 2 marble staircases that led up to the ballroom. That certainly has changed over time. Next slide. You can see how we use it as a multi-purpose room. I do live music performances that are free on Friday and Saturday night. Next, in the same building, 30 Lafayette, there are 4 cinemas. Next. So you can see the sizes of the cinema vary from 100 to that previous slide, which was the largest exhibition space of 265. Now, the next slide is to introduce the BAM Harvey Theater to you. So this has a unique architectural environment predicated upon Peter Brook's theater in Paris, which is called Le Boeuf du Nord. Next, this is the exterior of it. This, as it says, was originally called the Majestic Theater. It opened in 1904 as a vaudeville house, and it went through various iterations over time to burlesque, to cinema, and then it was boarded up for 19 years until we actually discovered that there was a theater there that we could take possession of to house the legendary 9-hour Mahabharata production by Peter Brook. Next. In 2012, we opened, this is our new venue. Next slide. This is the Richard B. Fisher building, in which this is the Fishman space. So look at what I just demonstrated to you. The big opera house of 2,000 seats, Proscenium Arch Theater. Harvey Theater, 874 seats, Proscenium Art Theater. But in the 21st century, it became very clear that if BAM was going to be in the dialogue of young and emerging and developing all performing art, then we needed this space, a purely, completely flexible environment. This is just demonstrating one variation. Next slide. You see, it can be used in any way that an artist would like to use it. The only restriction is that it's 250 seats. Next. This is the Hillman studio, and it really is as beautiful as that photograph is. It's a stunning rehearsal studio. Next. We now also have on the roof of that building a terrace where we've never had a terrace before. And next. Here we go into the BAM programming slide, and we're going to hope that this works. Next. So this is the Next Wave Festival. Now we're on to what we actually curate and produce.
A wave. A movement or disturbance in space and time that transfers energy from one place to another. A vibration around a fixed location. A swell. A surge. A rush.
Thank you. That is the introduction to the Next Wave Festival, which is America's largest festival dedicated to the contemporary non-traditional arts. Goes from September through December each year. And all forms heretofore known by humankind and those that are going to be discovered by humankind find their way into the Next Wave Festival. And next, this is a slide of just recently concluded production of Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Cometh, produced by the Goodman Theater in Chicago, directed by Robert Falls, their artistic director, featuring two important American actors, Nathan Lane and Brian Dennehy, in the epic production, which was 4 hours and 45 minutes. The audience arrived at 7 o'clock, and they departed the theater at 12 midnight. Next. So this is the newest kid on the block in Brooklyn. This is an 18,000-seat arena, and there was a lot of controversy about this coming into Brooklyn, but I can tell you right now it's the most profitable arena in all of the United States. And it's been quite an extraordinary addition to it and us within this burgeoning community. And next, we've developed a program with David Byrne, our first venture in partnering with that arena. And this is a project that David Byrne conceptualized. He wanted to work with high school students who are performing color guard, is what it's called. These are men and women in high school who use flags and fake rifles to do precision and rhythm. And he's invited all of his friends who are musicians, singers-songwriters, to compose for those ensembles and will perform live for this contemporary color program. And that gives you a sense of, right now, of what's going on in the borough of Brooklyn.
It's exciting.
It certainly keeps me up at night.
Can we start off by going back to early in your career, relatively early in your career, when you went to the Brooklyn Academy of Music? You had a background very much in theatre. You'd studied theatre, you'd worked in those kind of theatre roles, and you go into something like the Next Wave Festival, which, as you said, is about reinventing what contemporary performance can be. How did you take on that role? What was there in your artistic interests and what you wanted to do that made that the right fit?
Well, first of all, I got an MFA in concentration in directing. And I went to Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., which prided itself on training potential future directors in classical theater. So it really was a kind of full immersion into the aesthetics. But I was interested also in contemporary theater and text. So while on the one hand, you were learning how to deal with Shakespeare and the Greeks and Moliere, I was also trying to figure out what to do with Ionesco and Beckett. So that it was just something that I was curious about because I wanted to be part of the quotidian discourse while also honoring the past. And so I guess it was some kind of enzyme in me that it was just preconditioned to want to investigate new ideas in the theater.
And so music, dance, those areas that are very much part of what we associate with Next Wave and with Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Yeah, but that's because in other part of my life in which I was given the privilege to work at City Center Music and Drama in Manhattan at an early age, and that was at a time when City Center had a relationship with the New York City Ballet and New York City Opera, and so I was able to watch George Balanchine actually work in the rehearsal with the New York City Ballet dancers, and Julius Rudel, who was the music director of the New York City Opera, of actually watching stage directors direct new American operas as well as classical operas. And then there was a man named Sal Hurok who created a destination for the 55th Street Theater for international presentations. So the world of not the theater, but the performing arts fed into my background of the training that I had.
And what did you think you were getting into when you first went to the Brooklyn Academy of Music? I mean, we've talked about Brooklyn now. What did you find? What was there when you went?
Well, there was nothing there other than the 30 Lafayette Avenue. So the first Next Wave Festival, 1983, all happened inside 30 Lafayette Avenue. So the first two productions that I actually produced, one was the photographer Far From the Truth by Philip Glass, and secondly was The Gospel at Colonists, which was a hybrid music theater work by Bob Telson, composer, and Lee Brewer from Mabu Mines, of contemporizing Oedipus at Colonists. And I applied all of the most traditional methodologies to producing those works, even though we would call them innovative, pioneering ideas of hybrid art, music theater. And it was about giving form to those individuals so that they could, for the first time, work on a larger scale and achieve their goals and as to what they wanted in terms of these collaborative works. And they were very collaborative works of art. But probably the scariest business meeting I had was my first meeting with Lucinda Childs, who was doing a work, a commission from BAM, a work called Available Light, in which she was employing collaborators from the West Coast. And there was this unknown composer in New York City working with her who had come from San Francisco named John Adams. And there was an unknown architect in New York City, also from the West Coast, but from Los Angeles, and his name was Frank Gehry. completely unknown, in New York City. But my first meeting with Lucinda Childs, I couldn't hear her. I was like going, she talked so softly. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't understand a word she's saying. We got over that, but
How?
because I really made myself present with her. The kind of like, I was almost on top of her, listening to her talk as to what she wanted to do. But the funny story has to do with when I got the drawings for the Frank Gehry set, and both the production manager and I said, this can't fit on our stage. You would see only the top of the dancer's feet above the top of the proscenium. He had designed a stainless steel Z. And so I had to convince Frank Gehry to take the red eye from Los Angeles on a Saturday night, fly to JFK, come to the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He walks into the theater and he says, my set can't fit on your stage. Et voila, that's why you're in Brooklyn. So there were many of those kinds of stories that happened in the first iterations of the inaugural Next Wave Festival.
And how long did it take to feel like it was something that was going to stick around and that people were going to love?
1987, opening the second theater, the former Majestic Theater, now called the Harvey Theater, with Peter Brook's production, the Mahabharata, 9 hours. And we did it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 3 hours each, dark on Friday, and a marathon both on Saturday and Sunday. Well, first of all, this is a big lesson what I learned, is that those marathons sold first. New Yorkers wanted the immersion, the experiential. The hardest one were the 3 nights in a row to get New Yorkers to come Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for the performance. But the discovery of the theater, which became very controversial, the 9-hour Peter Brook production, which was magisterial, we did the Mahabharata for 3 months, October, November, December. It became the flavor of the month, in this case, the flavor of 3 months. And we ended the 1987 Next Wave Festival with the John Adams Nixon in China opera. And so you had this bookend, the discovery of the new theater, the Peter Brook, the Mahabharata, and at the end, in December of 1987, Nixon in China. And that is when I knew that we had legs. That's the phrase in the theater when you know that there's something is solid. You use the phrase, it has legs. And so, yeah, it happened.
And continues to happen to this day, I think. You've talked a little bit about working with artists. How do you work with artists? What do you see as your role?
Well, first of all, I affectionately stalk artists. And it's part of my research of getting to understand their aesthetic, their art. And what I mean about stalking, I go to a lot of performances. You get introduced to a musical artist easy through the course of a CD or a choreographer in a dance company or a theater company by a DVD. But it's actually going to the performance. In this case, performances plural. And what I do is I try to meet with the artist individually, and I work very personally and intimately with artists, and I try to explain to them how crazy BAM is in terms of we are a big institution, and there are lots of issues about how work gets produced or presented. But I try to extract from them what it is that their future art is going to be, and to try to determine what would be appropriate and now in these three venues, And that is why I can say it's really about developing a relationship. And that is, if there's anything that I can tell you about my work as a professional, is that I develop relationships. I am the person who's talking to you, and I'm the same to my sisters and my brother and my friends and my colleagues. I don't change. I'm not a different person when I'm actually in my office in Brooklyn. I'm the same person. And it is about trying to make a connection. And it's really, I have great sensitivity to how difficult it is for artists to make work. And again, when I say this, in my society, that in New York City today, in the United States, with very limited resources, and how to do it, and how to do it intelligently, with support, et cetera, and to get to an opening night. That's all. I'm paid to get to the opening night after I made the choice. That's it.
How do you choose who you're going to work with? I mean, I think that there's obviously different points in your career in that I'm sure now that there is a different level of intense interest in people really wanting you to be involved with their work. But what makes the difference about you knowing that you want to work with somebody?
I think that I enter the performance venue tabula rasa, innocent. I leave my biases out on the street and just go in and ascertain whether or not I am emotionally and psychologically moved. Did I find this compelling? Sometimes I don't understand the work, but there's something innately curious about it, and I will go back to see it again in some kind of context. I think also, yes, there are mature artists who I maintain relationships with, and I go through the process of adjudicating what is the appropriate work for our venues. I service the architecture of BAM, those proscenium venues, and then the Fishman space. Not every work of art of a great artist is appropriate for BAM, and you use your critical judgment to ascertain what is it that you want to say, this is the right work for BAM, for us, and what we could do.
Tell us about an artist, an example of somebody with whom you've had a really rewarding relationship that has ended up producing great work in those spaces, in those BAM spaces.
I think probably the one person who I can address directly is the composer David Lang of the Bang on a Can organization. David Lang, Julia Wolf, and Michael Gordon created that group. But David Lang, more so than his co-founders, even though I work with all three of them, is someone who I personally connected to, and what I found and have continually found is that he needs the kind of big brother relationship to understand whether or not his ideas of what he likes and wants to do in challenging himself with not his musical work. I'm going to try to parse this correctly. It's not about his vocal ensemble or a chamber orchestra or a quartet or even symphonic music. That's not what I'm referring to. He has aspirations to do opera, music theater. And so he would come to me, and does come, and we sit down and actually talk about the project and take him through my colleagues, my staff at BAM, to actually get, in a very supportive way, get him to talk about what he's envisioning. And to share with all of you, I define myself as a creative problem solver as a professional. And I think that I have a team of thoroughbred horses who believe the same way, how to creatively solve the artistic issue for an artist who's conceptualizing an idea, and not to kill it, but to explore it for that artist and to open them up to the possibilities. And if you made this choice, what's the implication? And this is the choice. So that's a dialogue between us.
You were the first person in your family to go to college. Mm-hmm. You weren't somebody who came from a background in the arts. When, throughout your career and at the beginning of your career, did you have any sense of role models, of people where you thought, that's the work I want to do, or how do I get to be involved in that kind of area?
When I was 13 years old, my mother took me to the Schubert Theater in downtown New Haven to see my first pre-Broadway musical. And as I was seated in the second balcony looking at this show, I was completely mesmerized by what was going on the stage. And I had a different feeling. And I said to myself, I don't know what it is, but I want to be a part of this. I don't know what it is, but I want to be a part of it.
And was that something that you kept to yourself?
I kept to myself, but I didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, I was 13 years old. And it wasn't, I went to college and I was a reader, and I thought I was going to be a college English literature professor, until one day in my sophomore year, I was seated in the cafeteria and there was this rollicking, riotous group of people. And I said to my buddy, who are those? He said, those are the theater people. And so I inveigled myself into their social clutches and I never left, so.
Where the people are who are having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. At BAM, we work really, really hard.
Yeah.
But we also play really, really hard. We have a good time.
In Australia, in a lot of arts organisations, we've struggled with what the model is for organisational and institutional leadership and artistic leadership, and how between those roles you also, ensure that you have organisations that are sustainable and well run and have those kind of professional qualities. But we have models where there are joint artistic directors and general managers, where there's a CEO who is the artistic director, and there's some kind of general manager subordinate to that. Every single model we've explored. If you look at that, it kind of seems, if you wanted to analyse that, it seems that really it depends entirely on who the people are, whether it works or not, that any model can actually work with the right people in the roles. You've worked with Karen Hopkins. You've both been at BAM for a long time. You've worked together with her in the role of president, and you in your artistic leadership role. How have you worked together? What has made that partnership work?
Well, again, it is a man named Harvey Lichtenstein who hired Karen first, and then he hired me in 1983 to produce the Next Wave Festival. And we affectionately say, well, Karen and I bonded because we had a common enemy named Harvey. and we figured it out very, intuitively, instinctively, that we had to make this a success, and how to work with him and that created a very unique, specific relationship between us. I can honestly, before all of you, tell you very directly that I've always told her the truth, that it's an authentic, professional relationship, that this is the way I see it, and this is what I think we should do. She goes, I don't see it that way, and I think this is the way we do it. And I went, okay, let's close the door and work it out. And that's really how it gets done, is that no one in BAM over the 31 years that I will have worked with Karen has ever witnessed a disagreement or an argument between us, because we did that behind closed doors. And they really weren't real arguments. It was like difference of opinion.
So what happened behind those closed doors?
I said, I can't repeat what I said. I realized what I was going to say. And it is about finding the argument for your, it's like having to do the kind of defense of my dissertation when I got my MFA. You know, it's sort of like, I'm going to prove this argument to you, and I'm going to take you on this journey so that you're enlightened, because you're unenlightened. And I have to bring you. And her retort with me has, because where we would differ is on the institution. We never was there a criticism about the artistic choice, but you know, she would say, "Oh my God, what are you doing? You're going to do 44 productions in the Next Wave Festival?" I said, yes, because I'm going to do 14 concerts celebrating the None Such 50th anniversary. It's a unique opportunity. But 44, this is insane. No, it's not insane. Let me explain, you know, how, and it's that kind of discussion. But it was always together. We knew we had a unified, shared vision for BAM, that we wanted to do our best work on behalf of this institution, which is why we stayed so long.
And can I ask, with those discussions, did you both, I mean, you know, when you lost an argument, when either of you lost an argument, what happened? Was it, okay,
We go on with our lives.
we go on with our lives?
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't about the cult of personality or winning the argument of, you know, like I finally, you know, wanted to, that's not it. I don't want you to think that way. It's just like, we are two very different people. Our motivations are different, our personalities are different, but what we had is this work ethic and a belief and a vision about a local and global BAM, that we were going to work together to make it possible in the borough of Brooklyn, when the perceived destination is Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. You know, that the seeking of individual contributions for the artistic work that we do at BAM, foundations, corporate support, et cetera, and it's a very competitive marketplace. And how to do it together, and how to maximize and fine-tune your language and strategies, and of course your messages.
Tell us about the global BAM. So tell us about what because that's a very interesting part of an organisation that obviously has come of age in its own community and knows and understands its audience and has the strength that comes from having a secure position in its own community. What is the global BAM trying to do?
Well, I'll say specifically that the Harvey Lichtenstein years BAM had an international contribution, that international artists were represented in his artistic program. What I'm saying to you, that is Eurocentric artists. When I took over with Karen in 1999, I very clearly said, forget the international, we're global. And that other parts of the world, Oceania, Asia, Africa, South America, Eastern Europe, was going to have a place within the artistic profile of BAM. And that it was very important because we, as it started in those last vestiges of the 20th century, looking at the 21st century, that we were living global lives. And we needed to have representation in our community, that this is what BAM could do, that it could put a global agenda in front of our audiences and New York City and make a statement that could distinguish us separate from those organizations in Manhattan who are really committed to international or Eurocentric artists.
And how did your audiences respond?
Actually, within the Next Wave Festival, I have to say the kind of barometric reading of the temperature of that audience is innately curious. So they were willing to engage in the wide panoply of ideas that when you open up the floodgates can bring in global representation.
And something like the Bridge Project, how does that fit into not so much that global agenda, but that BAM as an international organization?
Well, our mission reads Home for Adventurous Artists, Art, and Ideas. And so in the ideas world, I encountered a problem that the New York City cultural journalists were denigrating the work of American artists doing classical work. And Sam Mendes was a British theater director with whom I had previously worked, was currently worked, and in a dialogue with him, I talked about this issue, and he said, that it's ridiculous because American actors can handle classical material equally as well as British actors. And I said to him, well, would you be willing to commit to doing a project that could demonstrate that? And he agreed to be the artistic director of a project and called the Bridge Project. And to make the Bridge Project complete, he said, we need a London partner because we have Brooklyn, New York City, and London, UK, and the bridge would connect. And he brought in Kevin Spacey and the Old Vic, who became my producing partner, and we produced 5 classical plays, and we toured them throughout the world. So BAM's identity as a producing organization opened up a whole new identity for us as being a producing and presenting organization, retooling our mission, which was we were established as a completely presenting organization, and now we are both a very comfortable producing and presenting organization.
What do you think the long-term effects of that will be?
Well, the long-term effects of that is about the interest that theater companies around the world have about wanting to partner with BAM on new theatrical adventures. So BAM is in that discourse.
We're going to open the floor to questions from you in a minute, so have your questions at the ready. I'm just giving you a moment to prepare your thoughts. Can we talk a little bit about audience? Because part of however you work with artists, however wonderful performances are, whatever those experiences are, if the audiences are not with you, it amounts to something very sad ultimately. How have you worked to engage audiences, to take them with you on the journey of what has been a real journey of development for an institution and an organisation, as well as bringing to them an adventurous artistic program?
Well, in the Next Wave Festival, I work with the art director of BAM, and because marketing is the crafting of a message. I think it's one of the most critical occupations in the performing arts is the marketing arm, because I can make the artistic choice and work with the artists, but they speak to the potential audience that will be in the theater. And so I spent a lot of time with this art director, and she comes up with options for the message of what the Next Wave Festival will look like. And it's always very contemporaneous, and it's always trying to find the most compelling way of presenting both a visual image and text in harmony that creates a compelling message. And we've gone through many iterations about the structure of marketing within BAM, and the current vice president of marketing, we also have our website and the development of digital new content to be able to speak to a younger audience, because if we could calibrate in some kind of diagram, you would see that the number of tickets being sold online has just increased every year. We still publish paper brochures, and those brochures really look like a contemporary performing arts event is happening. In the January to June time frame, it's about the curatorial process of producing and presenting cultural events for the city of New York that BAM is hosting, like Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Comet that I showed you that slide of. This is why I made that landscape, so you can really understand that there's a unique position that BAM plays within the cultural landscape of New York City. It's our job to do this work and to bring these ideas, these innovations, these cultural events to New York City, because these men and women who are citizens of New York City, residing primarily in Brooklyn and Manhattan, are curious. They want to get out of their apartments to go to one of our venues to be challenged by these innovative pioneering ideas about the performing arts. That is simply a fact. It's not every community, but it's my community. That is what they have. They want to do this.
It's a huge resource that to be able to draw on. Questions from you? Yes. Oh, sorry, we've got a microphone that's on its way.
Marvin Hamlish said at some point that it had taken 8 years to get chorus line on stage. I don't know whether 8, I'm remembering that accurately, but even if it was 4, it's not something that happens to operas. And I'm wondering what you regard as a satisfactory workshopping process for a new opera.
For new opera, well, I will go back to the Nixon in China example, because BAM co-commissioned it and co-produced Nixon in China. And so it was a learning curve for me about John Adams was commissioned to write the music, Alice Goodman to write the libretto. So John Adams' need was to create the piano vocal score. So we had one workshop that dealt with the piano vocal music. We had a second workshop that the Houston Grand Opera, which was one of the co-commissioners and co-producers. The other one was the Kennedy Center. There were three of us. And is that the Houston Grand Opera would do the theatrical workshop that the director was Peter Sellers, that Peter was going to do with the major soloists and principals of the opera. And then, remember that I said that John Adams his home is in the greater Bay Area, basically San Francisco. And there was a colleague there who said that he would do the full concert version of the opera without the chorus of the soloists, and then we were ready to do the final performances. So it was what the composer, my answer to you is, it's what the composer tells you, in this case, John Adams needed to really flesh out every aspect of the music, what the theater director needed to do in terms of actually working with, in this case, not only the soloists, but the dance company, which was the Mark Morris Dance Group, and how to figure out all of that before going into the formal process of rehearsing the opera in its final form. So it was a very elongated process, not as long as a chorus line, but it was a long process.
Where's the opportunity there to actually see the whole thing come together and then rewrite, improve, etc.?
And he did. The opera went from the Houston Grand Opera to the Kennedy Center and then to BAM. And by the time it came to BAM, and so it had its New York premiere in New York City, it was not the same opera, that he really matured it beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, it's a bit of a personal question, really.
Sure.
I'm wondering, 30-something years at BAM is a really long time to keep fascinated and curious about art when you're ingesting so much of it and making yourself blank and open to the experience. I'm wondering about when you'll know it's time to retire or leave, and I'm also wondering if you've had job offers elsewhere and what's made you stay. So how to know when to go, how to know when to stay.
Again, about staying is that there's no place like BAM in the United States. There really isn't. And I remember, it's what I make it. And so that's a very empowering experience. Given that my professional partner, Karen, made the decision to retire, I too had to confront, I guess this is logical, and it's organic, that to come to a conclusion of a cycle. And I think that in the 3 or 4 years, I will stop doing BAM and go on to another job, but I will not work for an institution. I'll continue to work with artists. That's what I do.
Hello. What's your opinion on...
Maybe stand up, sorry, because we can't see you. Thanks.
What's your opinion on the contemporary reinterpretation or reimagining of traditional works? I know you've got a grandiose or grotesque staging of a traditional work going on behind you there, depending on your point of view. But do you think that it has a place in a contemporary arts organisation, or does it belong in the traditional sphere only?
The Next Wave Festival embraces the re-imaging of classical works. There's a tremendous, gifted theater director named Thomas Ostermeyer, who is the artistic director of the Schaubühne Theater in Berlin, Germany, who takes classical material like Ibsen and restructures it in very strong contemporary ways and terms. And it's thrilling, exciting theater. Whether Ibsen himself would appreciate it, I don't know, but I will tell you that the contemporary audiences in New York City have. There's another artist named Ivo van Hove, who's a Flemish artist, who's the artistic director of Toneel Group Amsterdam, and he just gave the premiere of Antigone with Anne Carson's new adaptation, and that will be at BAM in September. Juliette Binoche plays Antigone, and it's an hour and 37 minutes of the play, and it's completely riveting drama. So whether it's the Greeks or Ibsen, and even Declan Donnellan, artistic director of Cheek by Jowl in London, who will take Shakespeare, Winter's Tale, for example, and give it a contemporary metaphor. I think, do you always want to see classical material this way? I don't think so. But given that they're intelligent, very well crafted, and well performed investigations, yes, I say, given the right context, the Next Wave Festival, that's kind of embracing of that experience, definitely. While simultaneously, in my theater in 2016, I will do a very important residency of the Royal Shakespeare Company, doing Richard II, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and Henry V in very traditional staging.
Thank you. Just touching on the uniqueness of BAM and the community in which it's situated, how much, or to what extent do you think you're a fortuitous kind of recipient of a moment in history, a place and time, and how much of it is manufactured? You know, could BAM exist in Queens, or could it be created in Queens today?
I think there was a time and place in the cultural history of the city of Brooklyn, borough of Brooklyn, and what it really was in terms of its Brooklyn did a nosedive in post-World War II. It didn't have that upswing. It had a nosedive. I mean, the baseball team, the Dodgers, left. They went to Los Angeles, you know, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Brooklyn Navy Yard was a very important manufacturer destination for the Second World War. The Navy didn't need any more shipbuilding, and there was the Navy Yard, you know, and there are a lot of issues affecting it. So the fact that BAM hobbled through those difficult times, and that I really like to put a lot of importance on Harvey Lichtenstein taking this job to this outpost and making it a place where men and women who were part of the avant-garde, postmodernist dance community could do their work. For example, doing a Merce Cunningham artistic season in that 2,000-seat opera house And he would say there were 500 people in the audience, So if you see 500 people in a 2,000-seat opera house, you go, oh my God, But he persevered and continued to make it possible to do innovative, challenging, difficult work, to have a place. And it built momentum, and it really was his idea to create a contemporary performing arts festival for the city of New York, but he didn't know how to do it. And that's how he ended up coming to me and hiring me to do it. So, it's difficult of what I know about the other boroughs, outside of Manhattan, obviously, that I don't think that they had the similar situation to have a organization that was making those kinds of risk-taking judgments.
Many of our organisations are lucky enough to have young people, particularly in school, come through our doors, and then they finish school and they disappear for 20 or 30 years. What successes have you had in managing to get some of those young people in your doors to begin with and keep them coming in your doors?
I guess I should tell you about the big demographic change in the borough of Brooklyn, that the economics are such that young creative people who still have that, I want to make it in New York, I want to come to New York, from colleges and universities all over the United States, they don't think about living in Manhattan. That was my generation. That when I graduated from university, my community, we all lived in Manhattan. And today, Brooklyn is this magnet. Why would it? Because they can afford the rent. Visual artists can have live workspace. There are clubs, there are restaurants, there are bars. All of the amenities are there, but they're young. They're in their 20s. The way that someone who's 21 to 25 years old, if they move to the borough of Brooklyn, the first relationship they have with BAM is with the cinemas. They can afford it, they see their art and independent film, or they're a film fanatic, we call them FFs, who are interested in, foreign film or some kind of extraordinary film series that the curators put together. And then the second thing that they discover about BAM is the BAM Cafe on Friday and Saturday night, free. All they have to do, the free music. There's music Friday and Saturday night, or it's a DJ dancing environment. Believe me, there's no one over the age of 35 in the room. So they buy their beer at the bar, and they have this 90-minute concert or 2-hour dance experience. And that's how they find out about, because we do a lot of marketing inside both the cinemas and in the cafe, about other things that are going on. So that's really how young people in the borough of Brooklyn, and it really is about the borough of Brooklyn. It's not about young people from Manhattan coming to BAM for that free concert or for those cinemas. The cinemas, for them, we had 200,000 paid admissions in 2014. So and 99% of those people are from Brooklyn, not from Manhattan.
So we've probably got time for one or two more questions. So last chance. Oh, you've got to be quick, because otherwise I'm going to take it. In Australia and the US, our funding models are very different. And, we rely on a relationship with government And part of that reliance has seen in the last 15 years a very heavy focus from funding agencies on making sure, particularly that our major companies are well run and sustainable. And that has brought about some quite positive changes in terms of the stability and the financial success of those companies. But it has also meant that you've seen recently a conversation start up from artistic leaders like Wesley Enoch from the Queensland Theatre Company or Ralph Myers, the outgoing artistic director of Belvoir Street Theatre Company, about whether what we have now is a lack of courageous artistic leadership, and whether there's a sense in which those running a good business type skills are being valued much more than artistic courage. Now, I'm not going to ask you to weigh into this kind of Australian debate, but it seems to me that there's something that I can certainly see in that we find it very hard to talk about to talk about the art. When we are talking about an event or something that somebody has done, we're very happy to say that there were huge attendances and enormous numbers of tickets were sold and more people than ever before enjoyed this wonderful performance. But it's hard to have a conversation about why, for example, a particular performance was artistically important, and also to talk about artistic success and artistic failure. And simultaneously, we have a situation in which arts critics, the number and so on, has been decimated by the fact that newspapers are having their own particular crisis. So we have a lack of conversation about the art. And I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about how you talk about the art, how you talk about those things, what artistic choices you're making and what is important about the art itself.
Well, I will reveal that when in January previous, I have two very critical meetings. One is with the marketing and communications department, and the second is with the development department, in which I roll out the Next Wave Festival. And so, we have a lot of people in those departments, so it's this. So the staff hears me talk about what are these names of these productions, these individual artists, and what they can expect as they then do their own research in order to do their jobs correctly, raise the funds in order to make it happen, and those who are enabling potential ticket buyers to want to buy the tickets. So those on the staff level, that is what happens. With my board of trustees, you saw the trailer of the Next Wave Festival. Affectionately, we call it a major motion picture. At the last board meeting, which is in June, I roll out the Next Wave Festival because the brochure is going to be given to them. The website is coordinated together, and they should have this video that gives some kind of insight into the creative path of what this Next Wave Festival is going to be about. And so it's a top-down, bottom-up dialogue with the men and women who are supporting the institution, trustees, men and women who are daily working to either find audiences or raise the money. And I am the same person who's sitting in front of you, sharing what I passionately believe, that we are inviting all of these men and women from our community, from the global community, to come to BAM in the autumn, and that we are going to have an extraordinary experience engaged in the pursuit of new ideas and new visions and pioneering forms and challenges that we will have a better understanding of the contemporary world of the performing arts at the end of the experience. It will all come to matter in some kind of contribution to our lives, because without it, without them making the work in their time and place, we will become without any sensitivity to one another, without any insight into humanity. And I don't want that society, and I don't think you want that society either. I think the artists of our worlds give us the kind of spiritual nourishment that we need as human beings to go through the quotidian of our daily lives with your respective families, your children, your parents, your relatives, and your colleagues and friends. And I didn't create them, but I'm happy they're here.
Please join me in thanking Joe Melillo for speaking to us this evening.
Thank you.